Change is riding its way into the heart of India. An entire community awaits the arrival of a brand new superstar. It's not just any gizmo, but a high-tech solar-powered ATM guaranteed to energize growth.
We do upwards of 40 million transactions a day. It's a world record. No bank has done it. We opened 1,000 branches and we installed more than 10,000 ATMs in 1 year flat. The economy is growing great guns.
Powering India's unique success story is private initiative backed by public capital.
Here is a mixture of the public and the private, which is something, again, a symbol of the strategy that India chose for its development path since independence.
As the country celebrates its place in the global arena, one organization, the State Bank of India, takes center stage, defining the ambitions of the world's latest economic powerhouse.
It's the inevitable indication that India has ceased to be an emerging country, it has emerged.
An economic boomtown called India, growing, thriving and bursting at the seams. With near double-digit growth, an India of the 21st century is literally being built from scratch. Powered by its youth dividend, over half of its billion-strong population is below the age of 35.
This rate of growth that India is seeing today is unsustainable unless we educate large numbers of people. It is true that it is an advantage that we have millions of young people, but if they were all millions of illiterate people, then it is no advantage at all. Now, how do you convert them? You cannot do it by saying that, okay, let now multinationals and private sector come in. They are not going to educate these people because it's very expensive. Only the state can do it.
To ensure India's much-vaunted economic development is more than skin deep, a unique experiment is underway in the western state of Gujarat. Kajal starts her typical day by making her way to an atypical school.
આજે આપણે શું ભણીશું ગુજરાતી બરાબર ને
This is a cutting-edge initiative, a collaboration with the private sector, backed not by an educational institution, but a financial one.
Janak Ramataram.
Bye.
This institution is instrumental in transforming the very face of modern India, be it in energy, infrastructure, or entrepreneurship. It is a public sector bank. The State Bank of India.
Sometimes I call my bank as the people's bank because we've tried always to be true to the people.
With a footprint of more than 18,000 branches and 22,000 ATMs, today the man tasked with steering this financial powerhouse is Chairman O.P. Bhatt.
72% of India's banking is in the public sector. And the economy is growing only on the back of banking facilities that are being provided. So India's public sector banks are empowering India's private sector to move ahead.
The Indian model has been one where from the very beginning, it has been complementary. Because if the public sector had not come in, then the Indian private sector would have been smothered by international capital. It was a new economy. It needed the state to come into areas which they could not on their own do in the beginning. But as in Japan is a good example, once the state has performed that role, it must know when to move out.
By the 80s, the use of free market forces as a tool for development had gained ground. By 1992, it was clear, if India wanted to join the global economic boom, its growth rate needed to accelerate. The Indian experiment with the public sector needed a makeover. Reform was the order of the day.
Once the reforms come in, you allow private banking come in. The State Bank was threatened. Large numbers of people, including myself, just withdrew our accounts from State Bank and put it into private Indian banks, which were far smarter, far quicker, better service, more mechanized, had an ATM and stuff. You couldn't even dream of a State Bank having an ATM.
We were losing market share in some areas, and to my mind, horror of horrors was that I think the perception in the minds of the general public about State Bank of India, it turned towards, stodgy bank, big bank, slow bank, etc. Not very responsive. So this was the time when we played catch up.
By the turn of the millennium, this 200-year-old bank reinvented itself. By modernizing, it reached out to a burgeoning middle class whose savings would finance India's unprecedented growth and transformation. It became an agent of change and set the tone for others to follow.
If you see India now, why India is growing so much, it is because you had a pretty robust public sector as well as a private sector in business.
Our growth is riding on the back of Indian corporates' growth, and we have been very successful in this because our growth in the international business has been 3 times in the last 4 years as opposed to only 2 times in the domestic market.
The country's growing economic muscle had propelled India Inc. into a new orbit. Indian conglomerates were buying out iconic international companies and brands. The globe had overturned.
We have, in fact, been the pioneers in a whole series of activities, and proudly so. We've been in the international business through exports of our own products for many years. It is only recently that we have looked for inorganic growth in terms of buying into or acquiring international companies.
Such deals were not easy for Indian companies. To play the global game, they needed the support of financial giants like State Bank of India to navigate successfully into international markets.
What then happened, which no one counted on, was the meltdown in the financial sector, which killed the markets internationally for JLR, and Tata Motors had a very, very serious problem. We turned to SBI as all other avenues started to appear very difficult to deal with.
That was a time when most banks, including the large and the foreign banks, were shying away from deals of this kind or this size. This is a deal which was fairly complex. As I said, it is cross-border, it is multiple currencies, multiple instruments, lot of legality that was used. So it was fairly complex. And to have an Indian bank which led a deal of this kind. So again, for that reason, it became a benchmark.
The message that it sent to the rest of the world was that Indian companies could in fact find a place, not just a foothold, but a place, a seat, if you might, in the international community, in the businesses in which they operated.
The giant had awakened. India was on the move, and its economy was moving even faster.
India cannot be the third largest economy in the world without having a bank or more than one bank in the top 10 or top 20 banks in the world. We don't have a single bank there. 10 years ago, China didn't have. Today it has got 3 in the top 10, 4 in the top 20.
The 2000s have seen the Indian economic juggernaut surge ahead at an unprecedented pace. Exports are currently around $200 billion and are slated to grow over 6 times by 2020. but there are many challenges that need to be overcome along the way.
To meet the basic amenities of life, we need to build infrastructure. Today, when the economy is clocking at 8% plus, if we don't build infrastructure, if we don't have roads, if we don't have port connectivity, if we don't have railways, how are these goods going to move from one part of the country to another? How are our export markets? How are we going to meet their demands on time?
Infrastructure would be necessary, therefore, to ensure, as I said, connectivity, as well as connectivity not only in a physical sense, but connectivity in the sense of bringing people into the mainstream process of participating in this huge global experiment that we are seeing in the 21st century.
Sustaining this economic opportunity required an accelerated thrust in infrastructure development. India needed roads, homes and retail on one end, and industrial hubs, economic zones and ports on the other. New and effective public-private partnership models were explored to fuel such initiatives.
We're doing about 100 million tons by 2013 as far as the port is concerned. By 2020, we would be handling about 200 million tons at the various ports that we are developing in India. It's not just the port, I would call it the future vision of Adani.
This is B. Ravi, CFO of the Mundra Port and Special Economic Zone. Spread over 100 square kilometers, it is seamlessly connected by air, rail and road, and houses its own power plant as well as an extensive pipeline network. Today, the Adani team is here for a special purpose. This gigantic infrastructure project is a product of an innovative funding model of the State Bank of India. Top State Bank officials have arrived at Mundra, and together they will take a tour of the port and inspect its various facilities.
This big platform, what you see, you can see about 3 to 4 ships together can be done on each side. The other side, 3 or 4. This side also 3 or 4.
You can dock 8 ships at any point.
Yeah. 6 for sure, and 2 or 3 there at the container terminal.
They can load and unload at the same time.
Yes.
For infrastructure, the numbers that are being talked about is about $1 trillion in the next 5 years. Now that is a large sum of money, but also it is required for long tenure. So an infrastructure project would be, 10 years plus, 15 years plus, maybe 20 years.
The first challenge for an infrastructure finance of this nature was the kind of security documentation needed. There is no specific asset. It's not like a manufacturing unit wherein you can have any assets and then they're all there for you on a permanent basis. Here it's a concession agreement. You own, operate, and then you have to transfer it.
Ports take a long time to generate cash flows, so large funds are required for their setup and day-to-day functioning, adding to over billions of dollars. Terms set by the government can complicate investment further. So how does a private entity generate funds of such magnitude?
That's the whole raison d'etre of having the public sector. That is, they don't have to give a profit account every week. That is, there is something called what is an external economy. What is the society benefiting from it? And here, because they can think the long run.
The bank looks at large infrastructure projects essentially from 2 points of view. The first is, what is the position of the infrastructure project in relation to the country's requirements in its quest for infrastructure development? And the second is, what are the project's commercial terms? Is it commercially viable?
If India is to translate progress into prosperity for its people, connectivity is imperative. By 2020, nearly 500 million Indians are expected to travel by air.
Just the demographics alone in India are very compelling. You can imagine the growth that is going to take place in new airports, new facilities, more airplanes. Whatever you look around the world, including if you look at China, there is no such a huge opportunity that is presented anywhere. There's a lot of improvements that have been made over the last 5-6 years. There is just no question about that. A lot more that needs to be done.
If you look at the way America was built, it was built on the back of bond financing. So millions of people would subscribe to bonds, $1, $10, $20, and it would come to hundreds of millions or billions of people, right? And then it could go and create railroads, the telegraph system, the airport system.
With limited bond financing of infrastructure in India, the State Bank created dedicated funds innovatively through capital markets.
We need the capital markets. We need the funding for us to be able to grow. We're not going to be able to create our own internal cash flow to fuel that growth. So State Bank of India it will be a key partner for us. It has played a key role to where Jet Airways is now, and it's going to be a key role for what Jet Airways is going to be in 2020.
India is a vast country blessed with abundant natural resources. But growth puts severe pressure on them for producing energy. The challenge is to balance energy creation with resource conservation, especially with the next 2 decades set to see a 600% rise in energy consumption.
One of the reasons why the developed economies, the mature economies are more modern and more efficient is simply because they have abundant power of all kinds. They have energy, whether it's from oil and gas, whether it is from coal, whether it's from nuclear. We don't have enough energy.
This is Tulsi Tanti, founder and chairman Suzlon Energy Limited. Suzlon is the world's 3rd largest wind energy company. One Earth, Suzlon's global headquarters at Pune, is home to constant innovation in renewable energy development.
400 million population doesn't have access of the electricity in India. We need energy security and sustainable development. And renewable is the right source in the energy mix to bring that.
Once you made the initial investment and set up the tower, then over time, of course, it's very cheap. But how do you do it? Now, the State Bank, in fact, has funded a lot of wind energy projects, and that's where they can come in a big way.
The concept of wind energy is extremely simple. A fan or turbine catches wind as kinetic energy, converting it into electricity. With operations in 25 countries, Suzlon has installed over 15,000 megawatts. Today, their smallest turbine produces 600 kilowatts and the largest 6 megawatts. Being environmentally responsible, State Bank of India has been quick to embrace this form of renewable energy.
SBI has installed the nearly 15 megawatt, and going forward, they will build nearly 110 megawatts. Most of the branch of the State Bank of India will be run on green energy.
So one of the things that we have done is try to measure our energy footprint. How much is it? To make our units across the country conscious that this is what is your footprint and what is it that you are doing to either not to increase it, but preferably whether you can reduce it. We have been installing energy efficient installations across the country. What we have also done is that we have installed windmills in certain states, and we intend to do more.
Girish Tanti, Executive Director of Suzlon, is taking a State Bank official to the company's global center to showcase the workings and monitoring of State Bank's wind farms.
To monitor all the turbines across the country, and more specifically we'll see the SBI installations. Each of the turbine-wise data is there. You have the performance, you have the complete wind speed. At any point in time, how many turbines are operational or in service or any activities are stopped, you can see them at any point in time. So basically, first level, any kind of resolution that is there, they could actually finish it from here itself, because sometimes it's not that you need to go physically there. SBI on its own have been working over the past several years, analyzing and seeing what they can do in the greener area. And I think it will greatly change the image of the company for State Bank of India. And it will set a path for others to follow.
We are poised for double-digit growth. We are expanding at such a huge pace that I think there is capacity constraint everywhere. Today, whoever can do whatsoever, whether it's the public sector or the private sector, and wherever possible in partnership. I think this is a time when if the economy is going great guns, we have to fire on all guns.
Today, a corridor of prosperity links the towns of India to the countryside. With over 70% of India living in its villages, modernity has permeated into the rural fabric as never before.
The rural opportunity in India is today very important. The incremental growth rate in rural areas is much higher than in urban and metro areas. If you look at the years 2008, 2009 and 2009, 2010, corporates across the country will tell you that bulk of their sales were sustained through rural sales.
You don't adopt a model where you leave the poor altogether out, of which there is a great danger in India. When you have a population of 1.2 billion, if 30% of that population is your middle class, you can power 9 to 10% rate of growth on that 30%. And the 70% can sink into the sea and still doesn't make any difference. So that is not a viable model.
This is Ramalu from Kandi district in Andhra Pradesh.
हम गांव में बहुत आदमी की पैसे पूछने वाला था, जो वो पूछे तो भी वो नहीं देने वाला। तुम्हारा कागज लाओ, तुम्हारा जमीन का कागज लाओ, तुम्हारा घर का कागज लगाओ, ऐसा बहुत सता के देने वाला। वो भी इंटरेस्ट ज़्यादा इंटरेस्ट में दिया। जब हमारा बहुत मुश्किल था, हम बच्चों को पढ़ना बोले तो भी मुश्किल था। हमारा बहुत अभी तो अच्छा है, पहले से अब सुकून से हम काम कर ले रहे हैं।
His is a story of liberation from the clutches of the traditional moneylender, via alternatives on offer by an institution that has shut up shop in his backyard.
SBI especially, we empathize with them and we are along with them. We say, okay, fine, you don't pay this money now, but you pay it back to us down the line when your next crop is good. And that doesn't mean that we stop paying, giving them a loan for this crop. We finance for this crop as well as for the failed crop previously, and we take these two together and take them along.
It is Ganesh Chaturthi, and the villagers are celebrating the arrival of prosperity at their doorsteps. Newly available forms of credit have ignited their entrepreneurial spirit, but this transformation is just the tip of the iceberg.
We had decided way back, I think in 2006, 2007, that State Bank of India will reach out to 100,000 unbanked villages through an outsourced technology model so that we'll be able to provide some basic banking services to them, deposits, loans, remittances, etc. And the challenge that we have to do all this in an extremely cost-effective manner because the volumes of business in rural areas are not very large.
The State Bank has to find their own ways of using technology which makes them inclusive, which makes them deal with people who are illiterate, who cannot sign, who cannot do calculations. Now, how do you, that's where technology comes in.
State Bank launched an innovative project in rural Andhra Pradesh, where mobile technology was used to create a door-to-door banking solution. All it required was a biometric scanner and a cell phone. It cut through the barriers of literacy, access, and age to address the credit needs of villagers. This is the Tiny Card Project. After gaining widespread acceptance and success, State Bank is implementing the Tiny Card solution on a nationwide basis.
SBI Tiny Card is a mechanism wherein we are able to extend our banking services. We have some people who go there, collect the money on our behalf, and they need not waste their whole day. They need not come to the bank just for the mere purpose of depositing cash or withdrawal of cash.
The impact of such schemes can be seen across the rural spectrum. Durgaya is a farmer whose life is intertwined with the unpredictability of the weather. One bout of unseasonal rain could result in poor yield, or worse, a bad crop. The fact that there is a credit safety net now has changed his life.
ఇంతకు ముందే మా అప్పులు తెచ్చుకుంటుంటే ఊళ్ళో వాళ్ళ దగ్గర వీళ్ళ దగ్గర అప్పులు తెచ్చుకుంటుండే ఇంతకు ముందే ఏమో 4 లెక్క 3 లెక్క పటేన్ల దగ్గర పటవాళ్ళ దగ్గర వాళ్ళ దగ్గర పెద్ద పెద్ద భూస్వాముల దగ్గర పోయి తెచ్చుకుంటుంటే ఇప్పుడు అవన్నీ బంద్ చేసుకున్నాం వాళ్ళ దగ్గర పని చేసుడు కూడా బంద్ చేసుకున్నాం బ్యాంకు వాళ్ళు ఇస్తున్నారు కాబట్టి బ్యాంకులనే తెచ్చుకుంటున్నాం బ్యాంకులనే డివైడ్ చేసుకుంటున్నాం.
The State Bank not only brings you credit, it brings you the computer often, and several other modernizing influences, and you can visibly see what difference it has made in the transformation that has occurred in India.
This democratization of empowerment that is taking place largely because of all-pervasive technology. And in this, of course, in the current context, it is largely because of the spread of cell phones.
The all-pervasive mobile phone has become an agent of liberation for Neelamma. Tiny Card's enrollment process uses basic applications such as the camera and Bluetooth to create a biometric record. And with a single thumb impression, Neelamma is launched from a tiny hamlet into cyberspace.
We've become the market leader in terms of thought leadership. We've become the market leader in terms of innovation. We've become the market leader in trying out new things. As the largest financial institution in the country, we have a responsibility towards the system so that whatever we do should have the right and positive impact.
It's a huge responsibility for them to not only be the institution which mops up the local incomes, but an institution which can provide an input there and convert local initiatives in business.
It's dawn in Western India. The women of Dholka are headed to the village primary health center for their prenatal checkups. This humble-looking facility is at the epicenter of an innovative health project that is transforming the hinterland.
अभी कुछ लेबर पेन में प्रोग्रेस नहीं दिखाई देता तो मैं इनके बारे में क्या कर सकती हूँ तो आप
It uses internet-based technologies and video telephony to provide state-of-the-art consultation from ultra-modern hospitals hundreds of kilometers away.
ठीक है, फ्लूइड भी ठीक है.
This is very unique, challenging telecom infrastructure project. It blends IT and telecom. It is not only a capital-intensive project, but it is very futuristic and with a long gestation period.
This is Sunil Kakkar, Managing Director of SBI Infosystems India. It is the first company to launch a video telephony service in the country. Called VOBB, it was created in collaboration with BSNL and is the revolution that is bridging the rural-urban divide.
With the help of VOBB, whatever facility we are getting in urban, same would be made available to rural, like education, like medicine, entertainment, knowledge. This will stop the migration from rural to urban.
The mindset change and empowerment that technology is bringing to the masses is really huge. It has never happened before. And therefore, it is also bringing about some kind of societal changes.
State Bank recognized the far-reaching societal impact of this entrepreneurial initiative and backed it completely.
It has performing different functions that are the requirement of the day. And it has managed to keep a link with the great diversity that India is. It has kept its link with the villages, it's kept its links with the mountains, the remotest parts of the country, and with the most sophisticated areas of India's business.
There is any bank in the world which will finance a few thousand rupees, which will also, with the same aplomb, with the same ease, also finance a few $1 billion. So that range that we have, and you know, this range is again in our commitment to serve the common man, in our commitment to serve every Indian.
It's 5 a.m. and the ATM team is off to work as usual. It's their job to ensure that all machines on their beat are topped up with cash. This is no ordinary task when you consider there are more than 22,000 ATMs in the network. Chairman O.P. Bhatt's day also begins early. He has his task cut out for him. With over 18,000 branches, 250,000 employees, and 250 million customers, State Bank is India's largest bank.
State Bank is a proxy to the Indian economy. State Bank is also a proxy for Indian society. Just like State Bank of India in terms of distribution is there in every state, every district, across the country, and more than one branches in most places, or ATMs or what have you. But if you look at India's social fabric, State Bank has got people from all parts of India, all cultures, all religions, all languages. Every district, there is somebody from there who's working at State Bank of India. So we are also a microcosm of Indian society.
Poet, author, Nobel laureate, and a valued customer of ours, Rabindranath Tagore.
State Bank is a 200-year-old institution whose diversity mirrors the story of India. It is a symbol of transition that India has made through colonialism, post-independence, and liberalization into the 21st century.
There was a shift away from the consensus of the 1950s on how the growth process is to occur. There was a consensus which I have called the Nehruvian consensus. From business to the left, everybody was agreed that this is the model of economic growth. And that shifts in the 1990s to a consensus where there is a different mix of the state and the private sector. There's an opening up which liberates the private sector in many ways and which doubles the rates of growth.
Change in mindset came after the liberalization in the 90s. So aspirations, thoughts, everything started changing. That was a slightly difficult time for State Bank of India because we were losing market share. That period, we utilized it to beef up, and we have been able to drive both efficiencies and excellence across the banking system. Because of our size, but largely because of the innovation that we brought about within the activities of the State Bank of India.
State Bank opened its doors to technology, and adoption was rapid. Process after process was computerized until complete core banking was brought under the IT umbrella. State Bank had finally made the transition from the gigantic ledger to the tiny mouse.
The State Bank workers had greatly opposed computerization of their records. And they said that this will lead to unemployment. Exactly the opposite has happened. The fact that State Bank made the transition to higher technology meant that they could grow much faster, and in fact has become one of the most competitive banks.
We started recruiting people in large numbers. We recruited about 30,000 people in 1 year. We started expanding 1,000 branches a year. Last year, it's a world record. No bank has done it. We opened 1,000 branches and we installed more than 10,000 ATMs in 1 year flat. So we started rolling out on all fronts, whether it is technology, whether it is business, whether it is people.
State Bank was quick to adapt to the changing needs of the Indian consumer. It introduced a wide spectrum of retail banking products like credit cards, education loans, home loans, life insurance, and a lot more, making it a financial supermarket.
State Bank is unrecognizable from what it was 20 years ago. So it reflects that transition on the one hand. On the other, SBI is again a symbol because it is a public sector bank which is now, after the reforms, powering our growth based on the private sector.
In December 2007, the world was hit by a severe financial meltdown. Legacies went bankrupt as the strongest financial institutions crumbled. It was the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression of 1929. If the State Bank had caught up in the 1990s, what lay ahead was its most severe test yet.
The Lehman crisis came in 2008. But before that, from the 90s onward, the demand for goods and services within India of this 1 billion plus population was rising. So our connect with the rest of the world in terms of export-import trade was much less compared to many other economies in Asia and even in Europe and America. So when the problem came in the West, it could not be transmitted to us in equal measure.
Because the Indian banking system had done two things. One, that it had remained regulated with state intervention, very close regulation. And the other, that it had also substantially modernized itself over this period, enabled the Indian financial markets to weather this storm. Our growth rates came down from 9.4% to 6.4%.
As fear gripped the markets, the flight to capital safety saw billions of dollars getting deposited into the State Bank every day.
Many of the foreign banks were unable to support their commitments to Indian large corporates. In the case of State Bank of India, we supported every corporate that we had, including many who are not our customers but turned to us in their time of need.
When we had a financial meltdown, when the price of the fuel was at $140, $145, when we as a Jet Airways, in order to be able to maintain our operations, we're incurring heavy losses and we needed to fund this. While all of the rest of the financial institutions worldwide could not provide, they did not have the liquidity to support us. State Bank of India provided us a loan of $250 million at a very, very critical moment in the operations of the airline.
But the crisis was far from over. Imbalance was building up in the system, leading to a slowdown in key sectors of the economy. Credit growth, too, was impacted.
The construction sector is the second largest employment giver in the country. When the growth in home loans stopped, what happened was that not only there were builders and construction workers who are out of jobs, growth in steel, in cement, in electrical components, in sanitary ware, in ceramics, in tiles, in PVC piping, all of it slowed down.
When you are going through a situation of depression or a kind of fall in effective demand, then here is the State Bank, which it does in as it has done in the case of the home loans, stimulate the economy, stimulate demand through this sort of process.
Sheltered under the wings of State Bank, India withstood the devastating effects of the crisis. State Bank offered the now famous 8% Flexi home loan that transformed India's housing sector into the hero of the country's growth story.
What also happened that when State Bank did what it did, the entire banking system sort of aligned their product range and their objectives to ours. And I think it was good for the economy. It was good for the consumer. It was definitely good for the banking system because Nobody was making losses at 8%, but we were able to acquire new customers, and there was a huge amount of cross-sell that took place. Car loans, credit cards, savings bank accounts, corporate salary accounts. So I think it was a multiple win-win-win situation for everybody concerned.
State Bank needs to be like a voltage stabilizer. It uses the huge amount of finances that is coming in and has to ensure that it does not lead to too much fluctuation.
Celebration it is, but not for State Bank of India alone. This is a celebration for India.
You can go to any state bank in the country and you will be served, and served very well.
You are an India-centric organization going for global leadership.
When India's largest bank decides to celebrate, the spectacle is as grand and scintillating as its success story.
Because we had been able to get such a large distribution, into one seamless system where the response time was in seconds, I thought I needed to celebrate it with my team, the technology department, the user department, those who executed this giant task. So many of them came to me. We did not know that this is what State Bank was, because we made this statement that we do 46 million transactions a day. We have got, and we also showed there that how, though it requires 3 days to walk to the branch, yet we set up a system. Though it takes a boat to go to the branch, yet we set up the system.
You push this giant into coming up and waking up by putting the pressure of the market, and then it can outperform the others who are not willing to do things which this giant is able to do.
The banking sector was growing rapidly. To remain a frontrunner, SBI created state-of-the-art technology centers that would help catalyze its growth further.
If you look at banking, in the next 5 to 6 years, 300 to 400 million people will rise to the middle classes, and the rest will become richer. All these people will require retail business for the bank. They may want homes, they may want cars, and they will want financial advice because they may want to invest in mutual funds or in the equity market or wherever it is. You will require maybe millions of bankers just to deal with these people.
This center is State Bank's technology backbone. From day-to-day banking to future technologies, SBI has infused IT into its veins. Home to constant innovation, it is testing different kinds of ATMs and kiosks that will elevate service offerings to a different level at the touch of a button.
Ultimately, we will seek to offer all the products we can through the ATMs, and I hope the ATMs will become the branch of the future.
India's rise to power and prominence has been momentous. But to occupy an influential seat on the world stage, it needs to think about the next step in its evolution.
A new consensus is emerging that growth by itself is not enough. It would require some fundamental changes. It is socially inclusive growth. It is not only the poor who are included. It is women who are included. It is social awareness on environment. That is, you have a long-term social view of sustainability of the planet. Now, these are the social issues which now need to be brought in along with the growth story.
The next chapter of India's growth is banking on technology. Riding into the remote corners of the hinterland are change agents, SBI's state-of-the-art solar-powered ATMs, guaranteed to energize the lives of those who come into contact with them.
Any Indian, big or small, any Indian, individual or institutional, we feel that we are there to serve them, whether or not they are banking with us. So when they need us, we are there for them. I want to move on from being the banker to every Indian to being banker to India.